Welcome to the Speak Like a Leader podcast with John Bates. Welcome to the show. With me today, I have a good friend of mine named Diego Ugalde. And Diego is a retired Navy SEAL. He's the CEO of the Trident Approach, which is a leadership coaching and training company. And he's the founder of Warrior Side, which I am now proudly a part of. And he is also the author of a book called Leading from the Deep. And, as a Navy SEAL, that's a pretty great name. And when we find out a little bit more about Diego, you're going to find out that deep has multiple connotations. So welcome to the show, Diego. I'm really glad to have you here.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me, John. Appreciate you.
So, we'll talk about Warrior Side and the work that we're doing together, but, tell me a little bit about, how you came to be doing things like the Trident Approach and Warrior Side and writing this book. Tell me a little bit about how all of that came about.
Well, it started when I was a child, and like most children in our culture, we don't understand how to navigate the mind. And so I was experiencing things as a kid that I wished that I was not experiencing. And so I left it to my mind to navigate and to figure things out, which was severely incapable of doing. And so not only was I sort of receiving a lot of external things, but I was also creating a lot of internal things. And so it led me to experiencing what I think is really kind of common, just a very difficult, directionless, detached state of existence. Although at the same time, it felt like everything was fine. What is there to complain about? I have food and a family and all the stuff. What's the problem? But what I ended up doing eventually was just building a tremendous muscle structure of suppressing how I was, all the things, and it just became a way of life for me. And
So let me roll you back, because I know some of this. Like, you grew up with a dad who, your dad and mom, like, they were there and they fed you, but like, if you didn't do things, sometimes you got the belt. And like, I think I've heard you say that you felt like you were a kid with a really big heart that no one could see, but you had really big problems that were obvious to everyone, right? You got in trouble when you tried to save your friend on the playground because, the first foul got missed by the teachers, but the second foul, which was you, totally got captured. So, from what I know about you, you you have a really big heart and you wanted to make a difference and you wanted to help people. Tell us about how because there was a teacher that saw you, and I think she kind of put you on the path to what you did. Tell us that story.
yeah, so I struggled a lot in school. My mom took off, and not allowed to grieve and process and that kind of thing, and I wasn't allowed to
Big
be
boys
angry.
don't cry.
Yeah, big boys don't cry. uh Not allowed to be angry, all that stuff, not allowed to disrupt. And so I packed in a lot of things, and I packed in a lot of things, so much so that I would be in school, in high school, and my nose would just start gushing blood just sitting there. And I didn't know what it was, but I would go to the nurse's office, and we would hang out because it would take a long time to stop these nosebleeds. And and it happened so often that we just became close. and we talked about all kinds of things. And she was just so great, and she always accepted me for as I was. And I was always doing very terribly scholastically speaking. So every time I got a really terrible report card, which was every single time we had a report card, I would just bust into her office and how do I break this news to my dad? This is not going to be okay. Like I never learned the lesson to just do better in school. So uh, one day, I brought in a report card that was mostly all D's. There was an F and maybe a C in there. And this is after, 50 of these conversations. And she finally asked, Diego, what do you think you want to do in life? And I said, you know what? I want to be a doctor. And she goes, Diego, you hate school, man. Doctors go to school for 10 years or something like that. Yeah. Well, do you know what paramedics are? No, what are those? They're kind of like doctors, but instead of going to school for 10 years, they go to school for 10 months and you learn how to save lives. And then you take them from the streets and you take them to the doctors and you go off and do your own thing. And I said, that sounds amazing. I think that's what I want to do. And, but I really loved being in her presence. There was no judgment. And, she didn't care what my grades were. She really didn't. And she was just one of the few adults that I had in my life, my uncle being the other one, who never needed me to be anything that I wasn't. And I wasn't doing anything wrong by doing whatever it was that I was doing at the time. So I was really grateful to have her. And then, the following year, I sat down to watch TV and turned on the movie Navy SEALs, and I'm freaking out. I'm like, these guys are jumping out of planes, they're driving cars fast, they're shooting guns, they're going after bad guys, and I'm thinking, what is this? And then about halfway through the movie, I realized that they have a paramedic on their team, and I was like, okay, this is it. This is what I'm doing. This is the most amazing thing ever.
And then you immediately became a Navy SEAL, right?
Yeah, that's exactly how it happened. Yeah, so it takes most people 2 years to make it to the teams. It took me 10 years. Um, First, I failed without knowing. I failed the military entrance exams to get to the SEALs, um, which I didn't even know about that until I got to boot camp. And so instead of being allowed to go on to SEAL training from there, I had to go into the regular Navy for a couple of years. I had to take classes. I had to retake the test. I do all this stuff. 2 years later, I finally made it to SEAL training, and I was there for 4 months. And I was just super, super, super immature, on a lot of fronts. I didn't properly prepare myself, and so I failed every single one of the timed runs that we had. And not only was I running slow, but my bones were not conditioned to the grind of SEAL training as it exists. So they broke. And I'm sitting here trying to hide these injuries from my fellow classmates and instructors. And one day I got a tap on my shoulder, said, well, I got to tell you, because this is a good story here. we we were not necessarily classed up yet, but there was a class ahead of us that was in first. So there's three phases in SEAL training, and then one that kind of doesn't exist but exists. And that was the one that I was. So we're in the preparation part of it all. We're doing everything that a class does, but we're not officially started yet. So the class in first phase are the ones who are really kind of going through or trying to weed you out, sort of thing. And that's where Hell Week exists. That's where you like. It depends on the class, but sometimes it's between the fourth and sixth week of first phase where you don't go to sleep for 5.5 days except for a couple hours, and you're just training nonstop. And that's where they get so many people to quit. Well, there's a time where we were in our pre-training phase that we were erecting these huge green canvas tents that could fit like 100 people in there. And that was for the guys who are getting ready to go through Hell Week. Is where they store their gear and all the things. And I just remember propping up these green tents with these 15 foot wooden poles, and and looking at the guy next to me like, I can't wait till they're setting up the tents for our class, you know? Like I can't wait to once the time I'm in Hell Week. Fast forward, I made it to first phase, and aside from not running very fast, I'm doing well. I'm doing the underwater knot tying, the breath holds. I'm doing the swims well. I'm doing the obstacle course well. I'm doing all those things. And one day, it was Thursday before Hell Week started. It was one of the worst storms in the history of Coronado. The trees were being uprooted. The streets were flooded. It was driving rain. It was about 50 degrees outside, just super cold, super stormy. And we had this evolution to do. It's called the beehive. And the beehive is they throw all the students in a pool with their boots and pants and t-shirts on, and they have to tread water with their hands above the water. And they have to get their swim masks and fill them full of water and put them on their face. So they're just breathing out of their mouth, treading water, and the entire time the instructors are pushing the students together in the center of this huge pool. And it's chaos because everyone is kicking each other. They don't mean to. What are you going to do? But everyone's choking. You know, it's not easy to tread water with boots and pants with your hands above the water. All of this stuff is happening. And if the instructors notice like your water level and your mask is going down, meaning you're swallowing and spitting out, they pull you out and they smash you with push-ups and, you know, bleeding and all the stuff and throw you back in the pool. You got to fill your, it's, people are quitting by the 10s and 20s kind of thing at a time. All the while, just driving rain, driving wind, and just, you know, hardly anybody. It's chaos. They bring us out at the end. And for the first time, the entire time that I've been at Buds, which was 4 months up to this point, an instructor was halfway kind to us. And he said, you guys, we're getting ready to go to Hell Week next week. And I promise you, there is nothing in Hell Week that is worse than what you guys have been through. If you can do that for 5.5 days straight, you're going to make it. There's no way around it. That being the first sort of half motivational thing that we ever heard from a SEAL instructor was gigantic. It just was like an injection of adrenaline and strength and resilience and all this stuff. So the instructors leave, and it's our job to go from there to then the galley where we're going to all have dinner. But the day is done. The day is over. We survived it. And you can see all the gear of all the guys who quit, you know. So we're the ones who are standing and we're running to the galley, and our chests are just like 50 feet wide. You know, we're just like, we're going to be Navy SEALs, bro. You know, we get our plate. I sit down at the table. We're just kind of going over the day while the storm is still raging outside, and, you know, palm tree things are flying across the street. And I get a tap on my shoulder. Hey, tomorrow there's going to be this thing. It's called a Hell Week board. And if you failed anything, swim, knot tying, breath hold, anything, you got to go. And they're going to decide whether or not you're going to stay in training. And my heart just sunk because I had failed every single time run we had. But he said, if there's anybody who's safe in the class, Diego, it's you. Because the instructors from the first day, they noticed that I wasn't as strong and fast as everybody else. They tried to get me to quit. They did everything in the world on a daily, from a minute to minute basis to get me to quit. And I just wouldn't quit. Sometimes we were exercising out on the beach, and all the instructors would be standing around me in a circle, kicking sand in my mouth. And I looked around like we'd be doing flutter kicks or something. And a lot of people in the class weren't even doing the exercises because the instructors weren't looking at them. And so I remember just being like, hey, man, if I get to be the guy who gives these guys a break, then that's cool. Like, but I had gone through a transition to where a lot of people in the class resented me for being there, for not being a fast runner, and all for sure all the instructors hated me. But all these people were quitting while I was staying. And then I started to, all of a sudden, people are like, I don't know how the hell you get out of bed every day. I started to get a lot of respect from these guys. Olympians were quitting and pro athletes were quitting. And I'm sitting here just doing my own thing. And he said, if anybody's safe, it's you. There's no way they're going to drop you at this point. Um, and so the next day came. So this is Friday before Hell Week. And they called me into an office, and there's a table there full of Navy SEAL instructors. They're looking through the file. They close it and said, you failed every single time run you've had since you've been here. You don't belong here. You need to go. And it was just all of that. Cold, wet, and sandy, bleeding, broken bone. My legs were actually broken, like all this stuff. The 2 years of trying to get there, retaking tests, everything. I thought at the time, I was 20 years old, that all of it was for nothing. And just 100x of getting the carpet pulled out from under you. It was just, it was brutal. It was brutal.
Yeah.
And the day they dropped me, I went up to my barracks room to grab everything out of my room, and I realized the class behind us was putting up our Hell Week tents, and I was just like, I just missed it. Yeah,
Oh,
it was
oh.
brutal. Yeah.
Well, and there's a saying that I wish I could have been there, put my arm around you and told you. I wish you could have been there when I lost my company after raising $80 million, could have put your arm around me and told me. But here's the saying, it's from Louis L'Amour. There will come a time when you think everything is finished. That is the beginning.
Hmm.
Right? Because that was not the end of the story. It was another little while, but that was not the end of your Navy SEAL story, right? What happened after that?
Yeah. Well, even if you told me that, I would have been like, okay.
Yeah,
There
right.
are there are just some things in life where you got to know what it feels like to be kicked in the nuts.
Yeah.
There's just no
Yeah.
way around it. It's
Yep.
like, hey, Diego, don't worry. This is just the beginning, bro. I
Yeah.
probably
Yeah.
would have
Yeah.
socked you in the mouth. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
this is like great. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Poof. Yeah.
But it's totally and entirely true. I just would never have been able to hear that.
Yeah.
But so I was in the military, so I had a contract. So what do you want to do now? So I ended up becoming a medic with the Marines, and that was an amazing experience. Working with
Hooah. Semper
Second Battalion,
Fi.
First Marines, yeah, like First Combat Engineer Battalion. I worked at the Navy Hospital in Camp Pendleton, all this stuff. And then when my enlistment came up to stay or leave, I said I had joined to be a SEAL. I'm not a SEAL. I'm leaving. So I left, but almost as soon the day that I got dropped, for the next 8 years, at, at least 3 times a month, I had really shitty dreams about not making it through for 8 years. And one day, so I got out of the military, I became a bartender, and then I became a civilian paramedic. And, but over the course of that time, I just, one day I woke up, I realized the only way these dreams are going to end is if I go back, which is not an easy thing to even consider considering where so one, it's the hardest military training in the United States. And then two, I know what it's like to invest everything that I did and you're not welcome here kind of thing. And I know what it is to break my body over this and still come up with nothing. So it was this huge, gigantic thing. And I just needed these dreams to stop. It was the only way. So at least I thought. And so I lost 70 pounds and I made it back at the age of 29, which is the cutoff. And the one thing that I wanted to do for sure, no matter what, because I knew things were not in my control. In my first class, there were people who broke their hips, they broke their head, they got flesh-eating bacteria, and they had to get their muscles and skin and everything scraped down to a bone so they could survive. All this stuff. So the one thing I knew is that it wasn't entirely. If people got pneumonia, it wasn't entirely up to me whether or not I actually made it or not. So the one thing that I felt like was in my control was there's something that's called a goon squad, and goon squads are happen almost always on runs, and so they go on these runs that you don't know how long they're going to be. They don't know whatever, but on the way back, there's a certain point where they establish a cutoff line where if you're in front of this line, you're fine. When the run is over, you get to go back with the instructors, drink, stretch, all the things. But everyone who's behind that line They don't want you to be behind that line anymore. So the goon squad is you have to do these hardcore Navy SEAL like punishment exercises. So you're doing fireman carries up the soft sand and berms. You're doing bear crawls. You're doing all these really, really hard races to sprint to the finish and everything. And the idea is if you don't belong there, you're going to quit because it just sucks. Or if you do belong there, you're just going to get stronger because of what you're doing. And hopefully you don't fall back in the run. And it's motivation to stay up on the run next time. Well, the first time I was in Buds, I was in every single goon squad we had. And it became part of my, like, I'm the king of the goons and no one can touch me sort of thing. It was something I was extremely proud of. Uh, that's what people couldn't believe, that I was still somehow, not only is there regular SEAL training, but I went through my own mini SEAL training of just getting smashed. Well, when I went back a little wiser and I said, I don't ever want to be in another goon squad again. And so this time I knew what I was in for. I was living in Hawaii at the time and I did these really silly things that I would never do now. But, they have those public parks where like workout stations where you have the wooden planks with the metal thing that you can do sit-ups
Yep.
on and things. I used to go work out there like at 3 8 o'clock in the morning and I would time it for the sprinklers. So I'd be doing sit-ups while the sprinklers were hitting me. And it's just like, I'm telling you, I would not do that today, but it's what I was doing back then. And I, unlike the first time, I spent almost all my time running in the soft sand, which the first time I went through, if I did any running, it was in tennis shoes and on the concrete. It was not even the same thing. It was ridiculously not equivalent. So I did all my soft sand running in Ala Moana Beach Park, and I showed up and I was ready. I was stronger than almost everybody. Uh, I was still never a fast runner, but I was way more than half the class. But what pissed me off though is the longer the class went on, the more and more the slower runners went away and went away and went away. And until finally I was still the slowest guy in the class, but I was running at like graduation speeds. But
Yeah.
I was still the last in the class. It pissed me off. But yeah, it's funny.
That's wild. So, and
Yeah.
then there was that day when the new guys were putting up the tent and you actually went and put your equipment in that tent.
Yes. Yes. And from that moment on, with a few exceptions, it was a big celebration because the first time I got kicked out, or the time that I got kicked out, there was just this assumption that, well, I'm not quitting, so everything is fine. I'll be here and I'll graduate. When I was removed from training, then I saw the then I was able to actually experience gratitude for being there. Like this,
Yeah.
me being here is a gift. They could have any one of these instructors could turn around and say, because it happens.
Yeah.
They turn around to a student, yeah, appreciate your time here. You need to get out. You don't have to quit. They can tell you you're gone.
Yeah.
And so Hell Week was a celebration. It was every moment I was in Hell Week, I had 10 years of history to look back on of all the shit that I went through to be there. It was not this dark, scary thing. It was like a blossoming. It was an expanding of
Yeah.
things that would happening. And at the same time, I was really injured. Like I partially separated my neck, and it really sucks because you have to. These boats are just pounding on your head
Yeah.
for hours at a
Uh,
time. It was a very interesting, it was a really powerful feeling. I was really, 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 really experiencing what it was to be human there, of just all the senses, all the feelings,
yeah.
all the things they were all there. And it was as big as it was ever going to get. I mean, there is no bigger arena that I knew. And that, of course, there are bigger arenas. They're all over the place, but I didn't know of any. And there was happening right there in Hell Week. And I'm like,
Uh,
before I knew anything about mindfulness, before I knew anything about being present, before I knew anything about anything, I was like, I am here. This is the arena Theodore Roosevelt was talking about. Like, I'm the one. Like, fuck yeah. It was
yeah.
really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's what a great mental bit of jujitsu to turn Hell Week into a celebration. Like that's tremendously inspiring to me, and it wouldn't have been that without that initial
It could
failure,
not have been.
right? Yeah.
It could not have been. Besides, the doctor said if I would have ran till Wednesday, my legs would have broken all the way through and I wouldn't be able to walk properly for the rest of my life. So it
Oh,
would have been somehow snatched away from me anyway.
yeah.
But you're right. If I would, let's say I wasn't injured, that whole time in Hell Week would have been, this is happening to me. This is happening to me. This is,
Yeah.
uh, just knowing myself as I did back then, it wouldn't have been a very, even if I made it all the way through, it wouldn't have
Right.
been powerful. It just would have been,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
this time I'm like, yeah, what's up? And I made a big game of it too. It was actually kind of funny. When you're in SEAL training, the littlest, smallest thing you do turns into this huge, egregious, punishment laden thing. This one guy, and we still have no idea why to this day, he wore two t shirts and we got wet and sandy. And you could tell that he was wearing two t shirts. And the instructors lost their minds. And the students were like, what the hell are you doing, dude? But all he did was wear two t shirts, so it's this huge,
Yeah.
gigantic thing. And you get in trouble 5 minutes, every 5 minutes throughout the day from
Yeah.
doing things. It's just an excuse to get beat and all that. Well, there was one day on the second time I went to Bud's, and this was not long before Hell Week started, that somebody actually did something really, and I think a couple of us in the class did it, where it was actually bad. This was not a Bud's problem. This was, people were going to get in real trouble, and as a class, we were actually really, really in trouble. And that's not a good feeling to have when you're in first phase, because first phase is literally designed to beat the spirit out of you. So we, of the ones who don't belong, that cannot be
Yeah.
done to the ones who do. But anyway, so we're on what we call the grinder, which is this concrete opening within the compound where we all do our calisthenics and do our flutter kicks and our push-ups and our 8 count bodybuilders and all the things. And it came to light that morning, whatever, I can't even remember what it was, but whatever it was that we did that was actually really egregious. And the instructors were losing their minds. They're putting the hoses down guys' throats. We're having to go get wet and sandy back and forth. And this is not hey, this is the first phase of training. This is like, we're going to break all of you, and all of you, none of you guys deserve to be here, but being serious. So anyway, it was as sunny as day as it could be, but the clouds and everything was just hanging right there. And I just remember the instructors saying, because Hell Week was coming up soon, and that they were going to be able to beat us in the dark where no one could see us, and where we weren't going to be safe, you know. And somebody said, I want to know who's going to be the first person to quit. And it was just a scary moment. And I said, who ya, instructor, or something. I said, what? Who the fuck said that? It was almost like Private Joker saying,
Uh-huh.
and the drill sergeant Arlie Ermy goes, "Who the fuck said that?" It was just like that. Who the fuck said that? And I said, "Who?" This? They said, "You're going to be the first person to quit." I said, "Yeah, I'll be the first person to quit." And I don't know. This was not intentional. This was not by design. It was just something that I do from time to time. And instantly, all those clouds, all the weight, all the real anger, all the everything just went away. And then all the instructors turned towards me again, like they did the first time, but this time it was kind of a game. And they said, "Well, why don't you quit right now?" I'm like, "No, no, no. I'm gonna promise you, I'll wait till Hell Week. I just want to see Hell Week. I just want to say that I was there, and then I'll quit. These are not normal conversations, and you don't talk to buzz instructors like this. But somehow it was all okay, and they just started laughing, and it changed the whole trajectory of everything. Well, anyway, that day came and went, and Hell Week came, and it's at night. I can't remember if it was a Saturday night or a Sunday night or something. And what happens is the Coronado Fire Department comes and they get their fire hoses and they spray them up into the air. So the entire where that grinder is, it's like it's torrential downpour of rain. And they've got automatic machine guns firing. They got flashbangs. So these big, huge like light explosions are happening. And every instructors are on megaphones. Everybody's getting wet and sandy. There's a lot of mass chaos and confusion. We're all doing push-ups and everything. And all of a sudden I could barely hear this guy yelling at the top of his voice 2 inches from my ear. "Ah!" And I'm like, I don't know what he's saying. I go, wait a minute. And I realized it was a SEAL instructor. And I said, I seriously can't hear. What did you say? And he said, you said you're going to be the first one to quit. And I said, oh, nobody's quit yet. 5 minutes. Give me 5 minutes. I'll quit. And then it became this game because what I didn't realize at the time, which I totally get now, the instructors, they go through hundreds of students every day and anything to break up the monotony, because it's all the same, it's just like the hardest day of these guys' lives and it's just is what it
Yeah.
is. But it got to the point where, because the students are the only ones who stay awake for 5.5 days. The instructors have a rotation, and it might be like 8-hour rotation or something. But every time the SEAL instructors would rotate, they're like, "Where the fuck is Ugalde?" I'm like, "Who ya? You said you're gonna quit." So I go, and if you ring the bell 3 times, you quit, and that's all you got to do for all the pain, misery,
Yeah.
cold, everything to end. So I would, whatever we're doing, whether even if we were carrying logs, I would run out. I would go to the bell. I'd be like, bang, bang, like, nah, I'm just playing, and then I run back, and I would go. And
That's really
somehow
funny.
it just lasted like that all week. Like I found a new way to almost quit all week long. I was just so goddamn happy to be there, man. It was
Yeah.
great.
Dude, that is such a great this is great. I love hearing this. What a great approach to Hell Week. That's awesome. So
Totally.
listen, I can already tell I'm gonna have to have you come back because we have like 20 minutes. So but
That's so
and I
funny.
do want you to come back. Like I love hearing these stories, and I think there's a lot of value in these stories, right? Like that's such
Mhm.
a great lesson. What if that Hell Week, what if you were just super stoked to be there? How would that change your experience of it? you know?
Changed everything.
And pretending to quit. Cause like every time you went over there and dinged it twice, like it would have just taken one more ding and you could have been done with all that hassle. But you were so glad to be there.
Yeah, it was almost like sacrilege. There were people that I was triggering by doing
I
that in the
bet.
class
Oh, I
because
bet.
that was like the big black giant demon that
Yeah.
no one, it's like Voldemort. You don't even speak the name. You don't even
Yeah.
that kind of thing. And I'm sitting here tickling Voldemort,
Yeah.
and they're just how there were some people who were really, really very deeply struggling, the
Yeah.
monster of the mind
Yeah.
just burning the hole of you should quit. Like
Yeah.
I didn't realize, of course I didn't think about it. I was
Yeah.
just like normal for many things. I just was not thinking about how it would affect other people, but it really jacked them up. I was like, this isn't a game, dude.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
hell yeah, this is.
Well, I think that's good. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those, it is kind of like I've noticed in my life, I will get so focused on what I don't want that I tend to create more of it.
Yeah, what you resist persists. Yeah.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. Just acknowledge it and let it pass. So, so listen, let's talk briefly about, cause I want to have you come back. I want to talk about the Trident approach and, um, how you take these lessons from being a Navy SEAL and apply them in business. I do also want to talk about warrior side because,
Mm,
I guess, gosh, it's what has it been, 2 or 3 months ago that
Yeah.
we got put in touch, and I was really, really super inspired by what you did, and you asked me to join you and facilitate these storytelling workshops, and then we just did a big event in San Diego, which I told everybody in San Diego that I know about. And it was kind of like the Moth Story Hour meets Navy SEALs at the House of Blues in San Diego. So tell us, what had you come up with Warrior Side, and what do you see as the big goal of what Warrior Side is doing?
I came up with Warrior Site because I've been doing keynotes for years. And this one keynote that I had in particular in Las Vegas, I was dropping some of the most powerful experiences and points of awareness that I have come to in my life. And as I'm speaking out to the audience, I'm looking at there's people on their cell phones. They could not be more any interested at all in what I'm talking about. And I'm like, how can this be? Uh, and so I finished the keynote. I go home. Turns out I had another keynote to give in Alaska just a few weeks later. So I built the keynote for that, and I just so happened to get a call from somebody, and they asked me how it was going. And I said, I don't know. I was going pretty good, but I thought the Vegas one was going pretty good too, and they could give a shit about what I was saying. And she said, "Well, tell me this keynote." And so I told her the whole thing, and she said, "It's it's really good. You just change the order in which you tell it, and just see what happens." Because I was telling it chronologically. I was saying, my name is Diego. I was born
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
England. I moved to California when I was 3, and then I got, not having
Yeah.
any clue whatsoever that I lost everyone within the first 3 seconds. I had no clue that I lost everybody. And so I did what she said. And it was the first time, well, there were people in the audience who was crying. Everyone was laughing. It was the first time I got a standing ovation walking off the stage. I'm like, that's all I had to do.
Boom. Dude.
So so that was in the back of my mind of this really amazing experience and
So
almost awakening.
I
Go
just
ahead.
want to say the power of structuring your talk in a way that works, right? And what I tell people is I ask people, so in what order does life happen? And if you put on your Stephen Hawking hat, the answer becomes chronological, right? Life happens in chronological order. So, what do you think the most boring order to tell any story in might be?
Mhm.
Oh, chronological order, because we're so used to that. Like we live that every day, right? So to restructure your story and not just tell it in chronological order, dude, I'm telling you, that is $1 million tip right there. That one, right?
Yeah, it was
So
enough.
you experienced it, right?
It created Warrior Side, which there's so, as you know, I don't have to tell you. I mean, there's so many more components that go into storytelling, but that was the one that started all of this. And so while I had that experience of this standing ovation kind of thing in the back of my head, I was very excited about that day also because somebody I coach flew out to Alaska to hear me talk. And I really, 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 really wanted to talk to him because he sent me a text a few months before. It said, "Dude, I'm being hunted." And it was a picture of a bear in the wild. And so, as a way to thank him for flying all the way out to Alaska, I took him out to dinner. And I was like, "You got it. What happened? Like, did you live? What do you mean
Yeah.
you were being hunted?" And he starts telling me this story. I get dropped off in the middle of nowhere in Alaska for a 5-day bear hunting trip on my own. A day into the trip, I picked up a trail of a bear. And on the second day, I realized that the bear was hunting me. And at that point, I was like, wait a minute, what? I said, every single time a twig broke, I didn't know if a claw was going to come off and lop my head off. I didn't know how to sleep. I didn't know when to sleep. This was a trained killer. I'm a hunter. You know what I mean? I do that. I watch football on the weekends, and it's him against me. And he had this incredible feeling of being absolutely not up to the challenge of this. The only thing he had was a gun.
Oh,
But this thing had a lifetime. It's been in his DNA of how to win the hunt. So he realized, I know he's using wind direction. I know he's using deflate, because he'd be looking out of the horizon, and about 100 yards away over a hill, he would see the bear look, see
yeah.
him, and then just kind of go down. And then an hour later, it'd be a completely different compass declination. And same thing, this bear would be, oh, there he is. And it's like, he's coming for me. So he whipped out his map. He said, if he's using wind direction and he's using defilade, he has to be coming through this little gully here. This is the only way he's going to come get me if I stay right here. So he stayed there, and the following day, just slowly, the bear came coming through, and he shot him and he killed him. And he's like, "Oh, I made it." The whole time he's telling me this story, I didn't even realize that the waiters had dropped off all our food, this opulent Alaskan salmon and stuff like that. I'm just don't even care. But the whole time he's telling me this story, I'm thinking, people need to hear, people wouldn't believe the stories that veterans have. Every veteran I know has 20 stories in their pocket that would just blow most people's minds. Not
Yeah.
because of anything else, it's just the shitty positions we put ourselves in as
Yeah.
a point of our existence, kind of thing. And even the word warrior side and even the House of Blues came to me in this way of just, I'm almost like in a meditative state listening to the story, and these things are coming through. So I left, I came back to California, and I said, I'm just going to create this thing, this storytelling thing. And something that happened also, very, very critical thing that happened in that realization, knowing that we were going to be talking to veterans and first responders, is I spent a great deal of time of my life coaching veterans who are going through the deepest, darkest, most monstrous things that human beings can go through.
Yeah.
And I know that there are very, very powerful speakers who go out there and they talk about these experiences, and they're fully in alignment with what it is to suffer as a human, in that they don't understand that there's more to learn from these stories. And so, in other words, when they're telling these stories, it's almost like drinking a teaspoon of poison every time they tell it. It's rooted in shame, it's egoic attachment, it's fear, it's judgment, it's all these things. But they get
Yeah.
standing ovations, and they're missing arms and legs and stuff, and people love them for it, so they keep doing it, and it's nasty. And
Yeah.
so Warrior Side is not going to be a part of that. So what we're going to do is we're going to teach a conscious approach to storytelling, where they're telling stories that are in alignment with truth and things that are vibrant and healing for them, so that every time they tell it, it's like taking medicine, and
Yeah.
they're getting freer and freer and freer, and dropping more baggage every time they tell it.
Dude, it brings tears to my eyes and I get all goosebumpy because like that's what we witnessed on Saturday night in San Diego, you know? Like that was extraordinary.
Yeah,
Just extraordinary.
I had the coolest review. Somebody said Warrior Side is Moth on LSD. And I was like, yeah,
Yeah,
dude.
that's a good one. I love
Yeah,
that.
it's super cool. And but most people don't understand that LSD, along with almost every other psychedelic, is powerful medicine. It's actual medicine. It's
Yeah.
really medicine. They don't. We've been taught all this stuff, and so it's hard to
Yeah.
accept that. But it is true. And one of the really interesting things that I experienced is when I came back from Alaska and started designing this thing. One of the things that I designed was the quintessential optimal audience review. So I made it up, you know. And
Uh-huh.
what if we do the perfect show? What would an audience member say? And I wrote out this small little narrative. And then after the show, I had about 7 or 8 conversations with different people who had some or all of that within the conversation. And I'm like, yeah, we totally nailed it. You know, I'm not going to say we put on the perfect show or anything, but we did what we set out to do. It was
Yes,
so
we
great.
did. Yeah. It was great to be a part of it. It was so moving. And it was it was just so real and so
Mm,
raw and so touching and so inspiring and so many great lessons. I mean, this is what we are missing so badly as human beings is being together and hearing those meaningful stories from each other that can make a difference for us and bind us together and let us feel like we're not the only one, and like have us see the deep intricate connectedness between every single human being. I mean, like, dude, this is medicine. Like, it is
hmm.
medicine to
Yeah, it
be
is.
at one of these and hear these stories.
Yeah. It's unfortunate we
So,
have this whole idea, this attachment to reality TV, because there's
yeah.
nothing
Oh,
we all
that
know.
nothing
We even
further.
know. We
Yeah.
even know that it's not really
It's
reality,
not reality.
but it's like taking like little hits of, you know,
Yeah.
whatever it is. And but when you have an opportunity to experience something like this, where people are being as real as fuck, like
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
where I was, and it wasn't okay, and
Yeah.
this is all the stuff, and because of that, here's what I learned, and then I got
Yeah.
stronger, and I got stronger, and I got
Yeah.
stronger, and here I am
Yeah.
now. And I on the very first show, we had a soft opening back in November last year. I had a guy come up to me and he said, "What I'm about to tell you is true. I had Navy SEALs in my mind every time I thought about things that I suffered from. And I thought, those guys are going through things that I'll never be able to imagine. And if they're dealing with that, then I don't even need to worry about this." And then he said, then I saw one of your SEALs stand up on stage and talk about suffering through the very same thing that I thought didn't even deserve to be looked at. And seeing that he was going through that whole process and that it was one of the biggest mountains of his life literally gives me permission to finally look at this, and I've got to deal with this thing now. And
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, it was
Boom.
so cool. Yeah,
Boom. It's
we're all
so
the
good.
same.
Well, and the other thing, like, that I love about being, being a part of Warrior Side and working with people on these stories is, um, the analogy I have is it's like a restaurant. There's a restaurant, it's on a point sticking out in the ocean. It's got this gorgeous 270-degree view of the most amazingly beautiful ocean and all that stuff. And then it serves mediocre food.
Hmm.
Like, really? Okay, you can get away with that, right? You can get away with that. And a lot of these people who have these stories of real extreme experiences, like you were saying, they'll go tell these stories. They're totally mediocre, but they still get standing ovations and everybody thinks it's awesome. And listen, okay. I mean, okay, but really, you're going to do something subpar just because you can get away with it? Do you have any idea what's possible if we actually go for how good it could be
Yeah.
versus good enough? And one of the things that I don't think most veterans know, I think that's true, is that those stories of really being in extreme circumstances, like, they're some of the most interesting stories, right? And they give you this tremendous advantage in the speaking world to be able to go tell those stories. And just because you get invited to do some speaking gigs because you have these extreme stories, if you're telling the mediocre style, like, like, if you're going to go do it, let's do it right. So it's really, really, I mean, and it's not just for the audience, it's also what you were saying. The whole thing of, let's get this story crafted so that when you tell it, it heals you and heals the audience, instead of just holds up this flaming ball of pain that everybody can give a standing ovation to. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. It really is. I think there are many things that separate Warrior Side from traditional storytelling organizations, and it is one of the differences is the the star of the night is the path itself. It is
Yeah.
honoring the path that we experience. The audience, as far as Warrior Side is concerned, is irrelevant in the sense that we're not here to impress them. We are here to honor what this particular situation was, what this path was, and what it led for this storyteller to actually experience. And so when you're really, really talking about really, really honoring the path, this isn't, these half measured, put together things. This is, uh, how can I, how can I most bring this story to light with all the power that it actually is, with honoring it as it is, and to the depth that it contains, and all of these things. And that comes through, our ability to find suspense, our ability to find foreshadowing, our ability to find the comedy in these really dark things. All of these components, suspense, everything, all of these components that combine together turn some of these transformational stories sometimes. And why not? I mean, you experienced it; it helped shape your life.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't we just put this thing in a powerful place as possible?
Yes, exactly. Like really honoring those stories by telling them really, really well and by sharing them with the community and with, anyone who will listen for the difference that they make. And so, that's why I'm so stoked you invited me to be involved with Warrior Side. So thank you for that because it's a real honor.
Same. It's like, thank you. Well,
Yeah.
for those of you who didn't catch the show at the end, I was essentially one of the first things that I told John was I have some level of understanding on how to tell a story, and I have some level of understanding how to teach storytelling. But there's just a difference with John being there. He knows how to mentor storytellers, and the points and critiquing areas and areas to focus on that he gives, uh, people are just, you could just see where this guy's awesome. So we're we're lucky to be with you, my man, for
Well,
sure.
thank you. It's mutual, so that's good. So I have to imagine that with the Trident Approach, which is your business training, and with your book Leading from the Deep, there's got to be some crossover. I mean, like I imagine that there's a lot of heart in both of those things. So let's talk about them. Like tell us a little bit. Start with either one that you want, the Trident Approach or Leading from the Deep or how they go together, whatever. Tell us a little bit
Yes.
about that.
So the most common question I got asked by corporate executives when I was active duty in the teams was, how is it that SEALs work and communicate so well together? And I was asked that question so often that when it came time for me to retire and transition on to whatever it was in the world I was going to be doing, it just seemed like a natural landing spot for me, was to create a business that helped leaders understand some of the higher points, the more elite level performance points that we had in the SEAL teams that could apply to any organization. And to be very honest with you, I always felt that there were things that were missing in the SEAL teams that I thought could be enormous, not only for the SEAL teams, but for the world around this. And one of those components is emotional intelligence, which I don't have any any resistance or reluctance to say there is no emotional intelligence in the SEAL teams. It's just, well, this is just what it is. There's no such thing as feelings. If you got feelings, you can go to sick call for that if you're weak enough to need that kind of thing. And I
Right.
just never felt that way at all. And the funny thing is, when I showed up to the SEAL teams after all that whole 10-year saga of trying to even get there, my superpower was hugging people. And I showed up to the platoon space and I was like, "Hey, bro." They're like, "Hey, what are you doing, dude? We kill people around here." I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, we got to kill people." It was just funny. But I never really, 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 really left that. So my whole career was always there was always struggle. I had a lot of compassion for guys who messed up. And in the SEAL teams, there's just no compassion for people who make mistakes. You know, they eat their young,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
no question about it. You mess up, that's kind of funny, we'll guess, and then you do it twice, and now we got serious problems. It escalates
Yeah.
very, very quickly, and I never felt that way. It just didn't make any sense to me. So what if we started an organization that showed all the what I felt like were amazing performance points within the SEAL teams, and then added this other component of humanity.
Yeah.
And so that's what the Trident approach became. And we were in business for a while, for over a year, and I started to get into this concept that I was completely unaware of. This whole idea of elevated states of consciousness, of just instead of just like being in this space of my normal waking awareness, places that people can reach through meditation, psychotropic breathing, or holotropic breathing, those kinds of things. I started to realize that there's this whole other level of existence within us that I never tapped into for the whole of my life, and no one else was telling me to tap into this. I started to understand that I wasn't who I always thought I was. That this world isn't what I always thought it was. That there's much, much, much deeper to go. And the deeper and deeper and deeper I got into these spaces of elevated states of consciousness, I just started to see how there was all this connective tissue that it had with leadership. Because most of the leaders, even the most
Yeah.
elite teams that I've ever been on, it's rooted in fear-based response mechanism of egoic attachment, that there is scarcity, that the world is coming to get us, and it's so obvious to make those connections in the SEAL teams because we're a military fighting force. So the only time we're literally going against people who are literally trying to come kill us, and us the same. But I came to understand after I had the luxury of leaving the SEAL community in my retirement, and with all my, I had all my limbs and everything, that we were creating this world that we were afraid of. And not only were we creating it, but we were bolstering it, we were supporting it. And so organization and SEALs aren't just this off, everyone, for the most, not everybody, almost everyone I have ever met is still has some subconscious connection to this idea that a saber-tooth tiger could be coming around the corner.
Yeah.
And that if they don't make these decisions based off of survival, then they're going to be in trouble. And that's not the case. That is not the case. We don't have to live in this fear-based attachment. And so the importance of that is when you start to transition from this fear-based state of existence to an expanded state of existence, everything changes. You don't need to make leadership decisions based on fear. You can make leadership decisions based off of your best ability to guess, because that's all we're really doing, and acceptance of all what is. And then all of a sudden everything shifts and you change the entire environment around you, especially if you're the leader. I've had plenty of leaders, and I know I must have had this affect myself of just showing up. And if it was a bad day for me, it was a bad day for everybody. I've had those leaders where we were just waiting the first 5-10 minutes of the day to see what kind of day we were going to have, because they had that kind of energy, and it's just not good for anybody. But once I started to see all the connective tissue that elevated states of consciousness had with leadership, I said, man, this is for everybody's on their own path, and that's all good. But for me, the whole path of attachment to fear was just, it just wasn't for me. And I
Mm.
know that there's a lot of other people who feel the same way. And so we created this leadership curriculum based off of abundance and love and support and compassion. It's still accountability for sure, but not in the same way as it was in the old way of thinking that I had.
Yeah. So how did that realization and that insight, how did that change like some of your decisions, your life, your path? Like, what's a story about how that impacted you?
When things went what I would have considered to be wrong in the past, who the hell do we hold accountable for this? All of this, as if I've never made a mistake before.
Oh,
Just
yeah.
looking who's we had this guy. I was stationed in Germany, and he was a guy that worked in our command, and we had like this wood shop. And his job was to everything we needed made out of wood. It was his job to make it happen, and he was a very, very polite, quiet, professional guy who always kind of hung out in the background. And we were in Germany, so twice a year there's Springfest and Oktoberfest. They're basically both the same thing. One just happens in the springtime, and one happens in the fall. Where you get in these huge tents that can fill thousands of people, and there's German music and German beer and chicken and all the things, and it's just an amazing thing.
Yeah.
And Americans don't know how to handle themselves, generally speaking, when that much alcohol is involved. So all kinds of crazy debauchery happens. There's always stuff that goes on. And one day I show up to work after one of the nights of Springfest, and I went back to the wood shop, and I see this guy's face is the black. I was a paramedic for 5 years before I got into the SEAL teams, and I've never seen anybody's face that black and blue and that swollen in my life, my whole life.
Oof.
Not on the battlefield, not in anything. Just half of his head was just swollen and a bruise.
Ah.
And I said, "Hey, man."
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, his eyeballs were just glistening blood red.
Oh,
You could see the color in his iris, but there was no white. Everything else was
yeah.
just like
Red.
just ruby red,
Ah.
like the collar of your shirt. It was just. And I'm like, "Hey, he looks like he should be dead." And I said, "I need to." I didn't. I struggled to ask him, but I didn't know what to do. So I was like, "Hey, I need this bench thing. Can you do it?" And he's like, "Yeah, no problem, chief." And I walk out, and I go in the office. I'm like, "Hey, what the fuck happened to this dude?" And he's
Yeah.
like, "Oh man, he's in huge trouble. He's in huge trouble. He got hammered at at spring of Oktoberfest, and they had to take him out in a cab. Like two guys took him out of the tent and took him to a cab and tried to get him home. And he started fighting them in the cab, and the cab driver freaked out, and they were in a tunnel, and he stopped in the middle of the tunnel and said, "You guys got to get out." So they ended up getting out inside the tunnel, and he took off because he obviously didn't deserve whatever was going on there. And so they started to fight in the tunnel of a road. You know what I mean? Imagine just
Yeah.
any tunnel on the way to the airport. That's where they were fighting.
Yeah.
And the two sober guys who were trying to protect him, who they were really good friends with him, and this animal came out of nowhere. And they ended up hopping over the. Sometimes they have those walkways and the railings and stuff. They ended up
Uh-huh.
hopping over and they chased him. He opened up one of the doors that led into the tunnel, and they chased him in there. What they didn't realize is anytime one of those doors open, alarms go off everywhere
Everywhere.
because this
Yeah.
should not happen. People shouldn't be walking it. So these cops come, and as soon as he sees the cops come, he gets in a 3-point stance like he's playing football. And one of them was a female, and he launched at her and he crushed her against the ground. And there were two other guy police officers, and they just commenced to beating him to a
Oof.
pulp. And as I'm getting this story, I'm freaking out because I know this guy. He's the most calm, quiet, you know. But anyway, they bring him in later that day or maybe the next day for something that we do in the Navy where all the chiefs in the command sit and decide whether your case needs to be escalated to the to the executive officer and then the commanding officer, or whether we can handle it on the chief level. And he's standing in front of us with his hat in his hand and just saying, "This is not me. I don't know where this came from." Acknowledging maybe for the first time that he's got a problem with alcohol. And I'm sitting here at this table full of chiefs, and these guys just start to hammer him about his decision making and his professionalism and his reflection on the United States Navy. And I'm looking at some of these guys and I'm like, motherfucker, dude, like yeah, you were doing the same shit. You didn't get caught, but you were doing the same thing. And like, I'm telling you, like, I don't even, and I'm sitting there and it's this whole thing about castrating this guy. There was no compassion he was obviously sick. He would never have
Yeah.
done that if he was, so he would have never tackled a human being, a female, and he just would have never done that. But alcohol does these things, and he obviously was having what this guy needed was compassion. He needed help. He needed all this stuff, and yet he was standing at this room of people who were supposed to be aligning with him. And what do we need to do to support? They're lining up to skewer this kid, and but now I understand. Before this connection to higher level state of consciousness, I just sat and I judged all of them for judging him. So I was literally doing the same thing they were, but just with a different target. There was no
Yeah.
difference. With this elevated state of consciousness, I could now see that there was no difference between them to him and me to them. It was all the same. It was all judgment. It was non-acceptance. And now what it's much easier for me to see that not only if that judgment comes in, what it is, which is meaningless, it doesn't mean anything, it's just a thinking mind that doesn't matter. And when those judgments come in, I can bring my state of awareness to who I really am and just receive these human beings as they are, as human beings. That's the difference because I was incapable of doing that before. I
Yeah.
was still judging. I was still leading from a place of fear. I was still responding from a place of fear. I was still acting from a place of lack. If I don't do this and everything is going to go to crap, all these illusions. But here's the hard part about it is that there's a lot of successful, really, really, really successful people, like they're millionaires and they own companies and
Billionaires.
billionaires, all this stuff. And so you can't tell them, and I never would, it's none of my business. Everyone is on their own path. But for me, that is not, I don't want it. I don't have any interest in that whatsoever. I do have an interest in stepping in to the fullest part of who I am and receiving people as they are, especially if I'm in charge of them in their quality of life in some way, shape, or form in leadership, because that is the best of me. And it certainly is not the best of me to sit and judge and all the things. And well, you need to pay for this because, it's just, for me, I see it as madness. But I understand why people do it because they think if they don't make those kinds of decisions, then this is always just going to happen and everything is always going to break and we're going to go out of business. I get it, but you can come to see where it's just not even true at all.
Yeah. Well, and
Mm.
that fear-based decision making, I think there's a pretty good argument that it doesn't always lead to the best decisions.
It rarely does. You can make these snapshot decisions that may or may not save your life or whatever, but all that is the thinking mind making the best decision it can. What's wrong with that? We're living in a three-dimensional world. But if you choose to make these decisions from your conscious or from your heart space, from who you really, really, really are, you can make these powerful very quick, very clear decisions without any anger, without any attachment, without any illusion of what could, what might be coming, whatever. You can still make the decision. It's not like I never fired anybody. It's not like that stuff doesn't exist, but it comes from a different place.
Yeah.
And it makes all the difference. It just is different.
I totally
And,
agree. I mean, it reminds me of the story of that samurai who chased this evil guy all over the place and whatever. And, they had this ongoing thing. And he like tracked him down and went into the place, the room where he was. And as he drew his sword and was about to strike him, the guy spit in his face. And he stopped and he put his sword away and he left because he didn't want to kill the guy out of anger.
mm,
Right. And it had gotten to him.
mm-hmm.
And, like, I just think that's interesting, right? To just be that aware of your state and where those decisions and actions are coming from. And it may or may not change what you're actually doing, but being aware of that state and controlling for that state and caring about that state it changes everything.
Yeah, you can still kill the guy in anger, but being aware that you're killing the guy in anger is super powerful. Instead of
Yeah.
killing the guy and 8 years later, after binge drinking and
Right.
all the addiction, being like, damn, it's just different.
Yeah.
Um, and it, and the only reason why I would say that it's better, if anything is better, is just less baggage on you,
Hmm.
because the unawareness
Yeah.
is what the baggage is what the suffering is. So that, in my opinion, I wasn't there, and I know this is a parable or whatever it
Yeah.
is,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I
It's
don't I
some
don't see
story.
any
Yeah.
issue with. I For all we know, the samurai needs to continue on and kill this guy for all the reasons,
Yeah.
but just doing anything, hiring, firing, going grocery shopping, doing it with conscious awareness
Yeah.
is a game changer.
Yeah.
If you are addicted to eating terrible food, I used to do this thing. I used to call them Tasmanian strolls, where I'd be sitting on the couch watching TV, swear to God on my life, minding my own business. And then all of a sudden, I would find myself sitting back on the couch watching TV, and behind me, every single cabinet and every single drawer in the kitchen was open, and about 3,000 calories worth of just crap food packaging was in the trash can, and I ate it all. And
Uh-huh.
I'm like, how did I get here? What just happened? Because I would eat really, really well all throughout the day, and all of a sudden, and I'd be right back, and I'd be like, oh, like,
What did
what
I
just
just do?
happened? I was entire. I really was. I really, 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 really was unconscious of what I was doing, in the sense that it would be minutes after it was done and be like, oh, and and then I spent the next several years being, you shouldn't do that, you shouldn't do that, you're not supposed to do this, this, that, whatever. And it wasn't until I started to accept that it was happening, and that the only thing I needed to do, this is crazy, the only thing I needed to do was bring conscious awareness to what I was doing. It was a game changer. I'm like, well, what do you mean? Well, that's going to be terrible because, oh, okay, so I just get to eat whatever I want as long as you're conscious of it. The answer is yes. Okay. So I started doing it, and I'm like, well, this isn't helping. But then I continued to do it, and then I continued to do it, and all of a sudden, it's 6 years later, and I haven't done it since.
Yeah.
It's just, that was some sort of fear trauma response that wasn't sure, what I just went. But the more and more and more, it's like, just understand, Diego, what you're doing in this moment. You don't have to stop. You don't have to be ashamed of what you're doing. You don't have to not supposed to not be doing this. Just, are you aware of this? Oh, and by the way, can you enjoy, like, to the guts of whatever this thing is that you're eating, every single ounce of this thing for all it's worth? for whatever 1,000 calories this thing is packing in. Can you enjoy every single calorie? Go for it. And I did. And I don't do it anymore. I
Yeah.
can't remember when was the last time. Oh, yes, I can. Last December, I was at my dad's house for Christmas, and they had this cookie jar that's not in the right place for my life. But other than that,
But you were aware of it.
I did. In fact, I would grab a handful of cookies and I would just sit there and I would put them on the table. Like, you're entirely sure that this is exactly what you want to do? And it didn't happen. But I grab them, put it right back in the cook. Not every time, but it happens sometimes. And that's like
Yeah.
a big giant. We're talking about somebody with addiction now.
Yeah.
That is enormous.
Yeah.
And the fact that I don't do that anymore. So
Yeah.
it's just, it doesn't matter what you do in my mind, in my path, for what it's worth. It doesn't matter what you do, just do it with awareness, and soon you choose to do the things that make you feel, because that stuff wasn't making me feel good, by the way. It was making me feel
Yeah.
terrible.
Yeah.
um it wasn't from judgment, it was just how my body was responding to that. My body feels a different way when it eats a block of cheese as opposed to when it eats a cookie. It just feels different. It just
Mm-hmm.
it's just doesn't feel good. And which for me, thankfully, cheese is like a healthy food for me. So it's one of my favorite things. But whatever.
Yeah.
And you can be sure that every time I bite into a piece of cheese, I'm like, "Damn, this is good." Yeah.
That's funny. Well, so eh, and it sounds like that's a lot of what plays out in Leading from the Deep. Tell us about the basic thesis there.
When I wrote the book, I didn't know what book I was writing. Many people told me that I needed to write a book, and I was like, "Bro, I don't read. I don't. I don't write. You can be sure I'm not writing a book. You're talking to the wrong person." And I got so many, points of guidance from people that really loved me and saw this potential with things that the Trident approach could be. I just heard it so many times, and one day I got connected with somebody who was writing a blog, and they asked me to contribute to their blog, and they just asked me a simple question on leadership, a really simple question, and I responded, but I wrote 13 pages, and I said, "Okay, I think I go. I This is one little tiny question about leadership. I think I can write a book."
Yeah.
So, but I didn't know what book. I didn't know if I was going to be writing about Navy SEAL stuff. I didn't know if I was going to be writing about leadership. I didn't know if I was going to be writing about the Trident approach. I didn't know if I was going to be writing about psychedelics. I didn't know if I have a really interesting life. I didn't know if I was going to write a memoir. So I just started writing. 4 years later, I finished, and I wrote 200,000 words. And I had, none of it was in any order. One paragraph would go immediately to some other random story that didn't have, there was no flow to it, was just stuff all
Mhm.
over the place. And in a sense, I got really lost, but it didn't matter to me. It didn't, there wasn't any suffering behind it, but I was just complete. I didn't have any touch points, anchoring points to all those words that I wrote. So I just left it to the side. And then, one day I went to Peru to go sit with some veterans doing ayahuasca as they were kind of healing through post traumatic stress and that. And I didn't have any particular focus, but those 200,000 words were hanging out there somewhere. And so I went and I took the medicine myself. And there just so happens to be an amazing, amazing library at this place. There's like 200 books that are all about jungle medicine and healing and therapy and all this stuff. And I took the medicine, and at some point during the first night of the journey, it said something really cool. It's like, "Hey, your book can belong in that library down there if you wanted to." And that was it. That's all it took. I went home a few days later. I didn't even look at the 200,000 words. I just started writing all over again from beginning to end. In 5 months, I finished the whole thing. It took about 12 months to edit it, but anyway, for my part, it
Yeah,
was done.
yeah. The magic
It
is
was,
in the editing, by the way.
oh my goodness. And so, yeah, it just became a book on the Trident approach, sharing the best of what we learned in the SEAL teams combined with our deepest understandings of elevated states of consciousness and how to lead the self and elite teams. And that's what the book is today. And not only does it seem to be helpful for leaders, but it is also helpful for people who are struggling with all kinds of things, mental health stuff, family stuff, healing stuff, all this. I really am very lucky to have a lot of really cool conversations with people from all kinds of different perspectives telling me how helpful it's been for them in certain ways. And that's especially when you're navigating things like consciousness. There's It's not a common topic. There's not, I mean,
Yeah.
there's probably tens of thousands of books on consciousness, but to be written by somebody who is still so totally human, you know,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
it seems to be helpful. It seems to be a pretty easy bridge to cross from people who don't have any connection to this at all.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
So that's cool. So like the Navy SEAL approach leavened with consciousness and psychedelics.
and it's just my opinion, and
Yeah.
literally nothing more. This
Yeah.
is just the lens that I see things through. It's not truth by any means. I consider truth to be something different, I think, than most of our culture does. To me, what is true is always true. There is no such thing as your truth or my truth. Truth is
Mhm.
so powerful, no one can own it. It either is or it is not. It either did happen or it did not happen. And I know the magical capabilities that the mind has of creating sights, smells, sounds, even experiences of things that never happen. So to me, truth is a big word, and I wouldn't
Mm.
say I couldn't say one way or the other if there's even a single word of truth in this book that I wrote, but it's the best of my understanding. It's just my perspective on things.
Yeah. Well, I've spent plenty of time with you and I have come to highly value your perspective. So thanks for putting it down there. And I think it's an interesting um, Venn diagram crossover of someone who's been to extremes both in the physical world, in combat, things like that, and someone who's been to extremes in the realms of consciousness. Because you've told me some of those stories,
Hmm.
and I know that you've gone deep, as one might
Hmm.
say. So again, people can find that at Amazon.
Yep, we have it on Audible and hardcover and soft cover,
Right on.
and
Now,
then
did you
yeah,
read the Audible version?
yeah,
Right on. So
yeah,
read by the author. I always think that's best, unless the author just has some issue with it. But
yeah. And there's a few times in there where I would get all Kermit the Froggy trying to talk my way through tears because it's serious, and it's deep,
yeah,
and some of those moments that you were talking about, the depths of the depth of
yeah,
were absolute turning points for me in my awareness and transformation.
yeah,
And it's still, after all these years, just brutally powerful. And so it's hard to kind of get through some of those things with keeping a straight voice. It
yeah,
just wasn't happening, dude.
yeah. Well, I think you're forgiven. Like you're human, and I think it makes the experience more real and deeper for your listeners. So
Yeah,
I for one, sign off on that.
yeah, yeah. It's
Well,
super.
so
And they told me that I'd hate the process, by the way. And I was thinking, I loved it. And I told
yeah,
them, I was like, hey, if you need anybody who doesn't want to read their book, I'll totally do it. It was so fun for me.
yeah. Well, you're also the guy who liked Hell Week, so
That's true. Yeah.
I mean, hey, but it's a similar thing, right? Like you put your heart and soul into that book and then there you are reading it. Like,
Hmm.
what's to complain about, right? Like, how
Yeah.
cool is that?
Yeah. I have talked to people who couldn't stand the process. They were just, I just want to get
Yeah.
out of that room. I don't want to ever do it
Yeah.
again. All this. And I was like, I don't know,
Yeah.
man. This is kind of cool for me.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I think it's really cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I've been imagining what it would be like as I read the entire Hobbit series to my 8-year-old son, you know?
Mm.
So I'm
Wow.
like, it would be, it would be
Yeah. The
some
voices
work
and things. Yeah.
to do that, but it would be cool.
Totally.
Well, so Diego, people can find Warrior Side at warriorside.org,
Hmm.
and they can probably also find you from there other places. Like, is there anything else that we should particularly mention before we wrap it up?
Most of the stuff that I do on social media is done on LinkedIn, actually. Um, and we do some stuff on Instagram, a little bit on Facebook. We don't do anything on
Yep.
TikTok. But yeah, and then also there's the Trident Approach, all three words, the tridentapproach.com.
Uh, uh-huh.
Yeah. Other than that, just hanging
Well,
around. I live in
good.
San Diego if you want to come hang out.
Yeah, well, I mean, and we're going to be doing these Warrior Side storytelling events around the country and around the world. And if you're listening and you have a group of veterans and you want us to come
Or
really
first
help
responders.
people uncover their stories in the most powerful way, we would love to talk with you. And if you want to come join us at one of these nights, they are super powerful and we would love to have you. So, you know, we'll, follow us on social media and believe me, we'll make a lot of noise about the next one. I think we're going to be doing one in San Diego in like, I guess the
July,
very
August
beginning
timeframe. Yeah.
yeah, July, August of 25. Um, and so that's coming up. If you're in San Diego, get ready. We'll send out save the dates here pretty soon.
Yeah.
And then I think we've got other things coming up potentially in Denver, and we're
Denver in
certainly
June, Boston, Denver, June 18th and 19th, Boston and New York in the late fall. And then
yeah.
we're doing a huge, gigantic show in New York City sometime in December. So that's
So
cool.
25. That's 2025. So if you're
Yeah.
listening to this before that, come to those. And if you're listening to this after that, go to warriorside.org and find out what's coming up in 2026, right? And beyond.
Yeah. The other thing is, we are a nonprofit. So far, I've been bootstrapping all this. If you connect with and believe in what we are doing, and you are inspired to give a tax-free, secure donation, you can go to warriorside.org and click
Yeah.
on the donation, or you can sponsor a show as well if we happen to be in your neighborhood of influence. But if
Yeah.
not, donations are enormous. We're trying to get to a place where we don't have to charge any of these veterans or first responders to for any of the stuff. It's just we're not there yet. I mean, all this stuff is
Yeah.
literally coming out of my pocket for the moment, which is fine. It's what I signed up for. But if you feel like helping out and contributing, man, we would be really grateful. That's for sure.
That's awesome. I mean, yeah. And if you want to sponsor a show in your area and we're not there yet, like call us. Like, we'll come on out, right?
Yeah, this is
Have,
actually fun for us.
yeah, have storytelling skills to offer, we'll travel.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, and the
yeah,
other thing about it is the really amazing healing and self-discovery and freedom and power that I watch people get as we coach them through their stories. It's, I mean, this is a gift of great value, you know?
yeah. I think we talked about it earlier in the podcast, if I remember right. But one of the things we had to be really careful is is asking, what is the story that you're telling?
Yes.
And there are veterans and first responders who have these incredible stories, and they get tons of accolades and tons of attention. They get standing ovations and all this stuff, but it's, it's killing them every time they tell the
Yeah.
story because they haven't healed from it yet. And so part of
Yeah.
our program is helping them learn to heal through their, it is because of their story that they are becoming who they're becoming and as powerful as they can be. In fact, we had two storytellers the other night say, I've been telling this story for years, but never not like this. And I feel
Yeah.
so, they feel so good after it. They feel so
Yes.
powerful after, they feel so clean after it.
Yeah.
Whereas before, it can be for some this addictive thing to be like, I'm going to go up there and tell the story again, and I don't know what else to do. And so it's
Yeah.
it's not healthy, but that's not how we roll.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. I love it. I love it. Well, okay. So we'll put this stuff in the show notes, and, if you follow the podcast, if you follow me, you'll be seeing more about Warrior Side. And Diego, thank you very, very much for joining me. It's really an honor. I'm super stoked to be doing what we're doing together. I'm super stoked to introduce my listeners and my audience to you. And you know, I'll see you tomorrow. Or I'll see
See
you
you
later
tomorrow.
tonight.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right on. Well, thank you, Diego, and thank you for listening. As we said at the event in San Diego, you know, your listening is what has this make a difference. Like I could do this if no one was listening, but it would make no difference. So thank you very much for letting me make a difference by the generosity of your listening. So thanks again, and we will see you next time on Live Like a Leader show. Thank you for joining the Speak Like a Leader podcast. Go be awesome.